I see that we have Wes Menzel from the planning department here. Welcome, Wes.
Good morning.
And then we also have Mike. Is that Mike Bodnar? Is that right? If you could just unmute for me, just make sure everything's working properly, uh, and confirm that you are the owner of the property. Usually bottom left of the.
I found it. Sorry.
Yeah.
It
No
was
problem.
on the found it. Yeah, I'm
Sure.
here, the owner of the property.
Okay, great. Are you expecting anyone else, Mr. Bodnar, to join us here today before we get started?
Not on my side.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and get into it then. I need to read through our hearing script. This will basically just cover the procedure for the hearing, and then we'll begin. So this is the July 17th, 2024 session of the zoning hearing examiner docket. The case before us today is case number ZH20240084. That's 2226 Langdon Farm Road. The purpose of this hearing is to allow applicants and any potential opposing parties to testify and to offer and refute evidence and testimony. This hearing will follow the rules found in the zoning code and the supplemental rules of the zoning hearing examiner. All testimony and evidence that an applicant or any other party wishes to offer must be presented at this hearing. The hearing will proceed as follows. The applicant, the applicant's attorney, or the applicant's agent will first present the applicant's case. In this case, Mr. Bodnar, that would be you. Typically, what I hear from folks is background on the project, what exactly it is they're proposing to do, what the zoning relief is that they need in order to complete the project, and then, of course, why that zoning relief is appropriate in this case. The hearing, if there were anyone here from the public, they would have an opportunity to speak after you had presented your case. I will hear from the planning department and Mr. Menzel to provide any testimony in addition to a staff report. In the event that any party testifies or offers argument in opposition to this application, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond to that testimony and or argument that was offered in opposition. And then finally, the applicant will have an opportunity to make the closing statements. After all presentations have been made, I will close the hearing. Decisions may be expected within 2 weeks. I may limit or exclude any testimony that I deem irrelevant or outside the scope of the application being considered. I may interrupt any speaker to ask questions or to make any comments. In the event of any technical difficulties with the Zoom technology, I'll do my best to troubleshoot those issues on the fly. But to the extent there's some defect in the tech that prevents us from meaningfully going forward with this hearing, I may continue or postpone the hearing at my discretion. Okay. Last thing I need to do is just swear in all of our witnesses. If you intend on providing any testimony here today, the zoning code requires that I swear you in before that testimony. So I'll collectively do that now with everyone in the hearing. So if you can just raise your right hand and you just answer out loud. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Mr. Bodnar, are you ready to proceed?
Yes.
Okay, floor is yours.
Okay, so the property at 2226 Langdon Farm Road has a existing 8-9 foot wide driveway. It's got 2 retaining walls that close that driveway in. They're failing, so decided to replace the retaining walls. While I'm replacing the retaining walls, I've decided to widen the driveway up to approximately 19 feet, narrowing down near the garage to maybe 10 or so feet. And so I put that proposal into the city and got various feedback from Wes and from other departments. And the zoning department decided that that looked like it was against front yard parking. But there's actually nothing in the code that would define this as against front yard parking. So it's it's under, a driveway can be between 8 and 20 feet. This driveway is between 8 and 20 feet. So the driveway as proposed meets that requirement. And then when you look at front yard parking, there's a definition of front yard parking in the code, and that basically says you may not park a motor vehicle on unpaved portion of front yard used for residential purposes. So that means don't park on the lawn. This is not that. I'm creating a paved space for cars. And then when we look at the code that was cited, front yard parking prohibited, it says in single family and RMX districts, parking for all uses may not be located in the front yard. Well, what's interesting about that is people are allowed to park on their driveways. Driveways are most often in the front yard, sometimes a side yard. So if you're allowed to park in your driveway, that sentence, parking for all uses may not be located in the front yard, inherently goes away. It can't be enforced because you can park in the front yard as long as you're parking on your driveway. The next part says parking may be permitted on access drives where such drives lead to the parking lots or spaces. Basically, if you have a driveway, you may, it says may, be allowed to park on that driveway if it leads to a parking spot behind the front of the building. But the may doesn't make any sense. It should be parking is permitted because you can park on your driveway. And so zoning has kind of cited this front yard parking prohibited, and I think incorrectly, because you can't prohibit, there's no prohibition from parking on your driveway. Driveways are typically in the front yard. And so I'm not sure how they're interpreting that. To go further, when we kind of tick through the things, the reasons for relief. I don't think I need relief because it's a driveway. It complies with driveway specs. The new driveway design will increase comfort, convenience, and safety of the residents and passersby. There's no cited or found zoning restrictions prohibiting the proposed design. 1425-35 states access drives must have a minimum width of 8 feet and a maximum aggregate width of 20 feet. This driveway complies. In addition, if there's additional reasons that a variance is needed, there's a huge amount of reasons for this variance. And so we go through them, and I talked about the front yard parking and how it really doesn't apply. The reasons for variance or exception if needed. We go through zoning, and it says the proposed work confirms with the underlying zoning code. It does. And we talk about, hey, lots of people own cars, on average 2 per household. Widening this driveway allows for parking of multiple cars. That makes sense for the city of Cincinnati and in this location. For following guidelines, the proposals within specifications of the codes applicable. We're looking at plans. The proposed connected community, which has now been passed, doesn't change the zoning at all. This is on Langdon Farm Road. It's a 35-mile-an-hour road. It's a busy road. It sees an annual average traffic of 6,000, almost 7,000 cars. This is double vehicle traffic of a busy residential road nearby, Rhode Island, which is also a little more main. And although we don't have data for truly residential roads, we could imagine that 7,000 cars a day versus 3,000 on Rhode Island, a typical city street might be half of that again. So this is a lot of traffic. It makes sense to get the cars off the road. The proposed widening of the driveways contained on the subject property, it doesn't impact the neighbors. It'll enhance the overall aesthetic and eliminate occasional or frequent parking on lawn, which my neighbors do. I've submitted pictures of people parking on their lawns because they don't have parking in front of their house like this house, and they don't have a place to park. A widening of the driveway is within code specs and will enhance neighborhood compatibility. There's no street parking in front of this house. So it'll eliminate the need to park down the street and walk in the rain or with children and walk down the street to get to your home. It's not going to cause any adverse effects, but probably enhances access to the property. It ensures convenient parking for more than one resident of the home, which will aid the residents in their ability to have immediate transportation to multiple places of employment. The driveway potentially create jobs it does during construction, enhances the ability of residents to have a second vehicle, enhancing the likelihood the household will have 2 employed residents. And most parking constrained cities, this is talking about tax valuation. If you think about Chicago or Boston, I have familiarity with both. I've lived in both. Parking spots are worth a lot of money. And so this asks if it would increase the tax valuation. Probably not in Cincinnati. I can't really speak to that. But parking spots do, and parking has inherent value. There are a lot of private benefits to widening the driveway for the residents. It's immense. There's no street parking available. The economic benefit of having the ability to park a second car on your property greatly increases a household's mobility and ability to have 2 employed residents. The private benefit of feeling secure and having your car parked safely off a busy road and where it is visible to you versus a block away or around the corner enhances your feeling of security and safety. The convenience of having a car parked immediately at your home is immeasurable, particularly during inclement weather and when you bring groceries in or you're chaperoning young children into your home. This goes on asking for additional reasons why relief should be granted. This is a public benefit. Widening the driveway are also immeasurable, providing peace for residents down the street and around the corner who value the ability to park in front of their homes, and the health and safety of passerby is not having to contend with parallel parking on a busy road. The standards for the variance: with no street parking available in front of the home, not having a place to park a second car limits the overall usefulness of the single family home. It puts an undue burden on these residents. The widened driveway will enhance the safety for residents and passerbys, eliminating the need for parallel parking on a busy road. And most homes in the area have additional parking immediately in front of their homes, while this residents do not. So the widened driveway significantly enhances enjoyment of their property. And then standards for special exemption, just going through the summary of reasons why relief should be granted. The proposed driveway is compliance with all code specifications. A widened driveway will substantially enhance the property for residents where there is no street parking in front of their home. A widened driveway will have no adverse impact on the character of the area. It is much more likely to enhance the character. It will aid in public health, safety, and welfare by eliminating the need for parallel parking on a busy road. And the widening driveway complies with all other standards. So that's really addresses one, this complies with code. It's within the bounds of a driveway, 8 to 20 feet. It's 19 feet wide at its widest point. And two, the citation of front yard parking really isn't applicable. And I would suggest really probably needs to be rethought by the zoning, the way it's written, because front yard parking definition is lawn parking on the lawn, and this isn't that. And then also the whole idea of parking may be permitted on access drives where drives lead to parking. That word may really isn't relevant because there's no prohibition from parking in a driveway in your front yard. And so the final kind of point in all of this is the zoning department doesn't seem to have an issue with a 19-foot wide driveway that becomes narrower. They had an issue with the hard edges of the driveway. If it was curved or softened in any way, it seemed to be okay. And there's really, no reason for zoning to get involved with a purely aesthetic point of view, unless it was a detriment to, the area. It didn't fit with the area, it didn't scope right. But we're talking about a driveway that is 19 feet wide and narrows to probably 11, 12 feet with a hard edge. And that's their issue, is the hard edge. And that makes no sense. There's a lot of mitigating circumstances why that hard edge exists. There's a tree in close proximity to this, so I'm trying to avoid the tree. There's also a drain line that comes out from the house and connects from the gutters, connects to the city sewer, and I have to avoid that. So this is a very, very practical design, and it makes a lot of sense for this particular scenario.
Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you for going through the factors and laying that out for me. Question that comes to my mind, and I do appreciate your arguments about how this may not qualify as front yard parking under the language in the code. But let me ask you, the intent with the widened driveway, among other things, is to create a space for a car to park in the driveway and also access the garage, correct?
Correct. And like any driveway that accesses the garage, if you have a 20-foot wide driveway, and if it went all the way up to the garage, you'd be able to park multiple vehicles there. Now, hopefully most people utilize the garage. We also know, just driving around the city, a lot of people don't utilize their garage. So we need to be cognizant of that and have places for cars to park.
Sure. But if the front yard parking prohibition in the code says parking may be permitted on access drives where such drives lead to parking lots or spaces,
correct,
within the principal building.
Yes.
And your stated intent is not to create a parking space that leads to a parking lot or a space within the principal building, then wouldn't this actually qualify as front yard parking prohibited? How do you reconcile that when you're not explicitly not trying to create a space that leads to a parking space outside the front yard? You're trying to create a space in the front yard.
This creates an opportunity for one car to pass another in order to get to that garage. So it absolutely complies with may be permitted on access drives that lead to the parking lots and spaces either within the principal building or accessory structure. And then front yard parking is defined as parking on the lawn. And so that's what the title of this is: front yard parking prohibited. Front yard parking is defined as parking on the lawn. This eliminates the need to park on the lawn.
Okay. All right, thanks. I appreciate that. Why don't we hear from the zoning department? Wes, anything you'd like to add?
Good morning. So our staff report focused on delving into the special exception request as part of the application. And we outlined information about to justify a special exception being the safety benefits of a wider driveway for cars backing out. In the context, the surrounding area has some larger, wider driveways across the street from the property, subject property, and the fact that the proposed design preserves a tree and the root system spreading out from the tree trunk. So kind of some of those kind of reasons is where we landed on recommending a yes for the special exception in this case. Now, as part of the discussions with the applicant over the last few weeks, I did do additional research on, because the applicant is stating that there's no definition of front yard parking, no definition of access drive or driveway, and then combining that with the definitions that we do know, which is driveway width is limited to 20 feet. And I cited a couple of other cases that went to the ZBA on front yard parking, claims, previous ZH cases that were appealed. So, and talking about the hard edge versus the continuous edge, which basically the applicant submitted their design, which was denied, but then they submitted a revision which had the continuous edge. I think I put that in the report. The alternative design, which we would have approved based on current zoning interpretation. But I think there should be some additional exploration of this. I think zoning staff is put in a difficult situation when we're reviewing these because it's really, let me see here. Like just what you were saying, where you were asking him if he intended to park there, like we have to, zoning staff have to like basically arbitrarily, or like it's kind of unclear what we have to do to determine if someone's doing front yard parking. And I know a lot of times we do ask follow-up questions on permits, but based on what the existing situation is a 9-foot, I think it's 9-foot wide driveway, straight back. And then basically he's adding on additional width to, within the driveway maximum width parameter. But the example that we are allowed to grant a driveway width, in this case with the retaining walls coming down up to like 14 or 15, 16 feet, that range. And then, so if someone did that and then they came back later and added like 3 more feet on, like basically we're changing how we review that, what was originally a driveway width of, let's say 15 feet, to allow the car doors to open next to a retaining wall. Then we're saying secondarily, we're saying, oh, now it's parking. Like, I guess I'm just, even though I'm following directions on interpretation, the fact that there's ZBA cases that claim that, or that have concluded that there's no front yard parking in other situations, as I noted in the staff report, I just think that there's broad enough language here to allow a additional review of that, and that's kind of what Mr. Bodner's asking for, is he's claiming that there's no need for relief. And so I kind of outlined the reasons for the special exception as one part of the report, and then also outlined the other cases where there was no special exception needed. And so I guess that's kind of just highlighting the 2 pieces of the report for you to consider.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. So, the way I have sort of interpreting this is that the hard edge is the real issue here with the zoning. in the interpretation that zoning takes, because the hard edge does create a parking spot that is not intended or is not capable of leading into a garage or a rear parking. Is that right?
Well, that's how the interpretation has been directed to me, but based on the other two cases noted in the report, like there's circular drives that have the space to park 6 cars. And this is where if you had a smart car, which is what, 12 feet long, like you could pull into this and then keep going. Like, so there's that's a kind of an arbitrary element of the review that,
Gotcha.
the hard edge is the determining factor. The case which one is it? The one on Herschel, that design has the circle drive, and then there's a 90-degree turn at where the circle drive meets the regular drive. Like, I don't know. That's like.
But in that ZBA case that you referenced, the circle drive, it doesn't appear that there are any spaces or any areas of the driveway that are specifically designed to park a car in. Yes, any driveway you can park a car in, obviously, but none of them are designed for a car to be parked there permanently, necessarily. You could, but they're not designed that way. And I think that's the distinction that maybe zoning has taken on this and in the past, is that to create a space in the front, it almost like if you didn't have a garage at all, you couldn't just install a driveway leading up to the house and just park cars in that driveway. I think the city has recognized that it's unrealistic to try to force people not to park in their driveways, but where they're going to draw the line is when the driveway's sole purpose is not from getting to the street to the garage or a rear lot. The sole purpose is just for parking. Because that'd kind of be like just paving part of the front yard, and just parking the car there. And
let me ask this.
Sure. Yeah.
If this driveway was 20 feet wide from the street to the building, would there be a prohibition?
I would be instructed to say that the driveway has to narrow a little bit since it's only 1-car garage. But if it was a 2-car garage, you could go 20 feet wide all the way.
I think that would be the difference.
And there's nothing in the zoning to specify that. This driveway can be between 8 and 20 feet wide. And it doesn't say in coordination with the opening of the garage or parking spots or anything like that. It doesn't link the width of your driveway to the size of your garage. The whole idea of, well, it's a single car garage and so it can only be 15 feet wide. That's nowhere in zoning. And so,
I think that's where section 1425.15, the front yard parking prohibition, comes into play. And I will admit, as an author of some not this section, but some of our zoning code through various ordinances over the past few years, I'll admittedly say that this is not the easiest or best written code in terms of interpreting this. But I think that that certain sections are intended to be further refined as you move through the code. And I think 1425 and the prohibition on front yard parking is meant to be a further sort of explanation of what is appropriate front yard parking and driveway dimensions and logistics. But
if we're going to talk about that and it's going to be upheld the way it's interpreted but not written, we can move on to the special circumstances of this issue where we're on a busy road. There's no parking in front of the street, or no street parking. There's a real limitation to the value of this property to any resident in its current condition. We've seen that with the pictures that I submitted with neighbors parking on their lawn frequently. We see this with people parking illegally on the street. I've submitted a picture like that and have many other instances where even the mail truck pulls up in the illegal parking every day, parks illegally, delivers her mail to these houses, and then gets back and departs. So we're solving multiple problems by creating a safe space for multiple vehicles to be.
Okay. And I certainly appreciate that. Is there anything else you'd like to say in closing or otherwise before we adjourn here today? Okay. So let me just begin by saying I'm going to approve your request.
Thank you.
I couldn't help but dive into some of the more academic arguments there, because I don't always get a lot of those during some of these hearings. So I really do appreciate your points. I think this is a really unique case. I think it's a great case for us to use to talk about this policy and to talk about how we interpret the code in the future. And so I really do appreciate you going through this process and coming in here with these arguments. What I'm going to base my decision off of is the fact that there are some practical difficulties to making it a soft edge and not a hard edge. You mentioned some utility and tree issues. And so I think that is what is going to be the basis of my approval for this decision, based on just how the zoning department is currently interpreting this. But I do think that this is a really interesting case, and that it's something that we do need to further refine and to work on, or at the very least make more clear in the zoning code. And so having said all of that, I mentioned at the beginning that decisions typically take about 2 weeks. This is going to be approved, so the decision is made, but I need to formalize that decision in a written opinion. And that's typically what takes the 2 weeks. I'll do everything I can to get this out to you as quickly as possible. I'm actually pretty caught up on a lot of my decisions, so hopefully I can get it out to you sooner than that. But that's sort of a general time frame or general estimate. Once I finish the decision, I put it into a PDF. I email it to both you and to Wes. As soon as that hits Wes's email, he can approve the zoning on his end, and then hopefully you can take the next steps.
I just want to express, David and Wes, both of you've worked with me. We've resolved the issue. And what I most appreciate is the acknowledgement that, and all codes are confusing. They're iterated over time. There are interpretations. And that when we can acknowledge that, hey, there might be something missing here or unintended here, that we can work towards resolving them is the real answer. And so I greatly appreciate that part of the conversation. And I also appreciate you approving this individual situation. So thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for going through the process. Sorry that you had to be the guinea pig on this one a little bit, so to speak. But yeah, I'm glad that we have a good resolution here. If you have any questions about anything in the meantime, between now and the decision, feel free to reach out to me directly or to Wes. And if you want an update on the status of the decision, you can reach out to me directly, and I'll let you know where I'm at. But otherwise, look for an email within the next couple of weeks. Should be good to go.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Mike. Everyone.